Hey, everyone. It's Naomi Wolf, CEO of Daily Cloud, and I'm really excited to be here today with Naveena Chittineedi, who is Daily Cloud's social media director and an accomplished contributor in other areas as well. She's a graduate of Stony Brook University in Health Sciences, which is where I met Naveena. And I wanted to talk to her today because she's also volunteering or serving in what she'll tell us about at a shelter for victims of domestic violence called a Safe Center in Bethpage, Long Island. And she has a lot to say about the coronavirus quarantine and what it's done to survivors of domestic violence. So welcome, Naveena.
Thank you so much for having me, Naomi. It's been a pleasure working for Daily Cloud, and I'm so glad to be here talking about this right now.
That's so wonderful. Well, we're really happy to have you. So let's just jump right in. This interview came about because you shared that you were working with victims of domestic violence and that there were specific challenges that they're facing right now. Go ahead and tell us about where you work and what you're seeing.
Right. So I currently do pro bono work as a crisis counselor at the Safe Center Long Island, and we basically advocate for victims of rape and sexual assault, human trafficking, domestic violence, and child abuse. And I'm basically a first responder. So as soon as the police get a case, the hotline will be notified about it, and the hotline will give me a call, let me know which hospital the victim will be going to, and what I should be doing. So I'll get there, I'll meet the victims in the emergency room, and we'll sit there as they're going through whatever counseling it is from the doctors, the nurses, and if they're being asked questions by the police. And after all of that is done, it's sort of my job to be there for them. And
Yeah.
I like to ask too many questions because they're being asked that all day anyway. So as they share, I like to counsel them, be with them, and I'm basically with them till they're discharged from the hospital. We connect them to, yeah, of course.
Let me jump in because you've shared such a lot of important and dramatic information. So your job is really, you get a call because it's routed to you when someone's in crisis and they've called the shelter. Then you physically go to the scene, which is probably often a violent or dramatic scene. Is that correct? Like you're not counseling people who are already at this the battered women's shelter, what we used to call in my day the battered women's shelter, the domestic violence safe center. You're going to where the crisis is taking place. Am I understanding that, Naveena?
And it's usually right after the crime happens. So it's as soon as, it's not always the case, but usually it's right after the crime happens. And we're sort of the first responders from the Safe Center that'll meet them at the emergency room as they're going through the forensic rape exam or whatever physical exam that they have to go through.
So you're meeting traumatized, I'm guessing mostly women, when police, and sorry?
Yes, I would say 99% of my clients have been women.
And is it that they call the center, or is it that the police are legally obligated to call the center if they have been called about what they see as domestic violence?
So in Nassau County, which is where I work at, and the Safe Center usually takes calls only from the Nassau County area, it's usually the police when they see one of the four cases that listed before, the rape and sexual assault, domestic violence, human trafficking, or the child abuse. The police will usually call the crisis center of that county specifically, and then the hotline will be able to call the first responders.
Oh my gosh. So that's so dramatic that you're I mean, no disrespect to young people, but you're a very young person. And I know that you've already done a lot of very brave things. I know you were, is the perpetrator there at the scene?
So no, that's one thing we definitely do not want, but I did have cases where they've shown up unexpectedly, and it's sort of in my control to like make sure that they're not able to get access to the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's we've had a couple of crazy cases like that, but most of the times we don't have them.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. What's an example of the perpetrator? I should say probably, presumed perpetrator or alleged perpetrator, right? Because there hasn't been a trial, but the person who presumably battered this woman or trafficked this woman. Tell a story about a situation in which that person appeared while you were helping the victim.
So the one that really pops into my mind doesn't have to do with domestic violence. It was actually a rape and sexual assault case. I had a young woman. She was, I'm not going to obviously give out any names or anything, but she was, I think, 17 years old. And she had come in claiming that her father had raped her.
Oh,
And she had other family members at the hospital who were there, her mother, and a couple of the family members, but they, I guess, didn't believe her, and they had sort of altercations at the hospital. It got a little aggressive, so the family had to leave. I had to intervene a little bit, and basically she said this about her father, and no one believed her, and she did not want to go back home after this, and understandably, of course not. But the family members were asking her to come back, and she was completely adamant about not going back. And usually in situations like this, what we'll do is that we'll try to contact our crisis center, and they'll try to get them placement at a safe home, or like even if we can't do that, we'll try to put them up at a temporary motel, just so they're not around the perpetrator. So that night, all of this happened, and there was no way that we could have taken her to the crisis center to get the shelter placed. Wow. Because she was 17, exactly. And she didn't really have anyone to take her. So I made some calls, and I actually got the Women's Coalition to come to the hospital so they can do the interview at the hospital. And thankfully she was placed that night. Oh, so long story short, as we were waiting to get her into a cab to get her to this undisclosed location of the shelter, her father shows up. Yeah. So this is after we already left the emergency room. We came back. We're in the waiting room. We're waiting for the cab, and I'm with her. I wanted to stay with her till she completely left the premise of the hospital. And he shows up, and she just starts completely freaking out, and she ran into the bathroom. And, at this moment, I didn't know what to do. I was just like, oh my God, she's in the bathroom. He's here. So I just had to take a second. I told her to stay in the bathroom. I went in there, asked her what happened. I told her to stay calm, that she would not have to face him. Came outside. I found a security guard. I let him know what was happening. I was like, this person cannot be next to her at any cost until she leaves the premises. So we waited until he went into another room. I got her out. I left the hospital, and we were waiting outside in front for the cab. And then as she was getting in, he somehow comes outside, and he's screaming for her. And she's screaming. It's this whole scene that happens in front of the hospital. But I just put her in the cab. I told the cab driver, you do not stop for anyone. We gave you an address. You take her to this undisclosed location, and you give me a call, please, as soon as you drop her off. And then the security guard, thankfully, he came outside. He held her dad, and then she got to the shelter. So Safely, yeah. So that was one pretty crazy situation that I remember.
Oh, Naveena, what a story. And people listening to this who don't spend time around, shelters for battered women or rape, shelters for survivors of rape, or places to counsel them, it's very common, right? I mean, it's not uncommon. It seems like you're telling such an extreme story, a father raping a daughter. But I literally, when I was a counselor for victims of sexual violence, that happened. I mean, it was not that unusual. And, it's the things that you hear sound so unbelievable to people who are not in that world. And do you think that that's a challenge for victims? I mean, it's kind of a tendentious question, but because the world you're in is not seen by everybody all day long, every day, like you see it, do you think that feeds into the difficulty people have believing victims of sexual abuse and domestic violence?
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually posted something about this on my personal Instagram recently. It's just the fact that we don't hear about rape because, people are uncomfortable talking about it in the first place. So even if it's prevalent in our society, no one wants to really openly talk about it. It's not a common discussion. So that itself is going to hinder just the optics of it being as prevalent as it actually is. So that's definitely one of the things. And even when you come out and say your family member did this to you, it's you're really going to be tearing families apart. Whose side are they going to pick? Right. So that's another difficulty. But in reality, 98% of the rape cases that happen are usually by the person that whether it's a family member or friend. So this happens. And just because we don't hear about it or talk about it doesn't mean we can't believe these girls or boys even. And, it's important to pay attention and listen to the facts of the case.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to make a gentle kind of suggested edit to what you just said. Mm-hmm. It's not the victim who's tearing apart the family when she tells the truth about having been assaulted by someone in her family. The assailant did it. Truth tears it apart. Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. People typically will blame the victim in a situation like that, and it's understandable. It's not that it's ever okay to blame the victim, but the cost of saying, yes, my husband raped my daughter, or my boyfriend raped my daughter, or my son for that matter, is so excruciating. I'm sure denial is very tempting. What's another you work on?
Actually, I haven't actually seen any human trafficking cases myself. I've been working at the Safe Center for 2 years. So the most of the ones that I'll see are usually rape and sexual assault. I would probably say 95% of the cases ever since I've been on call have been RSA cases, and a couple of domestic violence cases here and there, but I haven't thankfully seen any human trafficking cases, but it does happen in the Long Island, New York City area, especially since it's a hot spot with the I-95. It's just really easy to take the victims, go on that highway, and just disappear. So
I'm glad you bring that up, Naveena, because this community knows that we did some investigating legislation to help Native American women who are missing and murdered, and that too followed this pattern that you're describing of along highways, trucker, not to single out truckers, but if you're going to be trafficking women, trucking allows cover, shipping allows cover, and other people have said the same. So let me ask you this. Do women lie about being raped in your experience? Or what makes you believe women when you're called to a scene where a victim is saying, I was raped?
So as a crisis counselor, my job is to not make that judgment. If someone is coming into the hospital telling me this is what happened, I'm going to believe them, and I'm going to offer them all the counseling services that I've offered my past clients and my future clients. So that's definitely not for me to make. Do false allegations happen? Yes, but that's a very, very, very small percentage of the time. And you can't use that to nullify everything else that women say in general. So
again, what you're saying really corresponds to all the studies I'm familiar with that show that there are 2% false allegations in rape, but there are 2% false allegations of any crime. So it's literally consistent that people lie about arson, or lie about mugging, or lie about other criminal acts, no more, no less than sexual assault. So, I have been disclosing, and the Me Too movement really helped me, that I am a survivor of rape in childhood. And I feel like every woman I know has been sexually assaulted. And maybe it's just that unconsciously I hang out with women who've been sexually assaulted, but I really don't know. I don't know anyone who's gotten through life without that, at least not good friends. And I guess the reason I'm sharing that is I feel like there are things that happen to me, even decades later, when I have to, recount this trauma. And I imagine you witness a lot of the same things over and over when you're dealing with someone in the middle of a trauma. Can you describe what some of those are? I mean, I know that I weep and hyperventilate, for example. That's very common. But what are some of the things you see?
I think the main thing that I see is that victims go into a mindset of sort of thinking what's wrong with them. If they somehow made this happen, if they push someone to do it for them, it's sort of like self-blaming. And that's the first thing I like to tell them. This is not your fault in any way. No one is supposed to do this. It's not your fault. That's the biggest thing, that even at the Safe Center, that's what we're trained to tell our victims. It's not your fault. Whatever happened, that's their fault. Do not blame yourself whatsoever. And another thing is that they want to know that they're safe, because they went through something really traumatizing, and at that time they probably didn't feel safe at all, like the world is against them, that they have no protection. So that's another thing I try to offer them when they're at the hospital. You're around people who are trying to help you, who are going to help you, and who are going to be with you even after you leave this place. That's something that the Safe Center offers them, the constant free counseling. So that's something I try to reiterate to a lot of my clients, that they're safe and it's not their fault.
House victims of rape and sexual assault, or just domestic violence? I mean, is it really a shelter if you're raped?
No, so for rape and sexual assault, we don't unless there's a situation at home like the one I mentioned before, then we put you at the shelter, but most of the residents of the shelter are DV victims.
Right. So talk about that, DV victims, and SRA is you said RSA, rape and sexual assault.
Yeah.
Domestic
I want to go back to what you said before, because I didn't comment on that. And I do realize what you're talking about. Now that I speak about rape and sexual assault more openly, I do hear a lot of stories from a lot of my friends and family members and acquaintances that I've never knew this decide about. I don't know if it's just the fact that rape and sexual assault is that prevalent, or if I just hang out with people like that, like you said. But it's a real problem, and I'm really happy that I've created this platform through my own social media where people are able to come to me, even if I'm not working at the crisis center. I still have people coming to me, talking to me about it. It really helps.
That's so wonderful. Naveena, why do you think victims ask themselves so much what they did wrong? And I want to expand on that a little bit. A lot of the scarring of sexual assault is people can behave in self-punishing or self-destructive ways, like they're punishing themselves for what they did wrong. And even if there's nothing in their upbringing that leads them to think I'm soiled goods or there's something wrong with me, that's the imprint of sexual assault very often. Why is that? I've never understood that.
In my opinion, I just think it's the fact that, like, why choose me to hurt me? Is there something wrong with me? Did I do something wrong? Um, you know, this person is in a happy marriage or relationship or partnership or whatever it is, and this doesn't happen to them. Maybe they're a better wife or husband or whatever it is. Maybe I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. It's just a lot of questions that come up when something's so violent and something so violent happens to you. So you start questioning everything around it. I think that's part of what it is. But I'm
It's
sure
different for people who are like raped by someone they're not living with day by day versus someone who's, married to their abuser. I mean, do you think it's more damaging to be married to your abuser and see them day by day, or are they equally damaging?
I think they're damaging in different ways. I think it's just you're reliving your trauma every single day. If you are married to that person, I feel like there's no escape. For victims where it happens as a one-time incident, they're able to recover a little bit afterwards. They're able to seek counseling. They're able to talk to others. They're able to step out of that situation.
Right.
Whereas people living with their abusers, it's just sort of re-traumatizing yourself daily and just going through those same mental abuse and physical abuse over and over again. That sort of does something to the severity of your trauma.
I'm sure that's true. And don't a lot of abusers say, you're provoking me? I wouldn't hit you if you did an X. And society says to rape victims, you wouldn't get raped if you weren't wearing that outfit, right? So there are a lot of messages. What would you say about that? Messages that it is your fault. You are to blame.
I think it's absolutely yes. There's nothing someone can do that will provoke you to physically harm another person. It's just a thing about respect. It's just a thing about mutual respect. You don't hurt me, I don't hurt you. That no one has that right to do to you. Right. So regardless of whether they say you're provoking them or whatever the situation might be, just one human being is not allowed to hurt another human being. It's just the end of it.
And a lot of totally agreed, and I'm really glad everyone's hearing you say that loud and clear. And I'm sure it helps the victims that you counsel to say that, to hear you say that. A lot of misconceptions are out there as well, is that certain demographics have more violence, and especially domestic violence, than others. In other words, white upper middle class people don't beat their wives. That's something that working class people do or people of color do. Do you want to speak to that? I mean, is there any truth to these myths, or are they totally
actually? Yeah, I think that's actually completely a myth. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate based on your socioeconomic class. I think it affects you all across the different classes, and I think it's really just a individual family issue. I don't think it has to do with whether lower income families or middle class families. Mm-hmm. I definitely think that's a myth. And domestic violence is also correlated with like higher alcohol usage and different types of stressors. So maybe that's why you'll see a little bit higher percentages in lower income families, just because like stressors around from the world, whether it has to do with your jobs, your income, or any other like familial stresses, which is probably higher in low-income families. Maybe that's why we'll see a little bit of increase, but it really doesn't discriminate just based on socioeconomic class.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would chime in that my guess is that there's no difference at all, but that affluent white people hide violence better. And also, the police don't intrude on privileged families.
It's
Like
true.
one corollary of wealth is privacy.
Absolutely.
And, wealthy white men get to say, it's a personal disagreement or, everything's fine here, officer. And, there's so much discrimination that's documented about like who gets arrested, right? And
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an excellent point. It makes sense that if you don't report it, then it never happened. So yeah, it makes sense.
how
How
about the clients you see? Do they come from all backgrounds and all demographics, or is it
I would say, so we're located in Nassau County, and usually the cases that I'll see are in probably lower class to middle class
Mhm.
clients, I would see. I would
Right? But there's no such, I'm guessing you would say there's no such thing as a typical victim, right? Because
no,
there's nothing
absolutely
to,
not. My clients have been aged from 2 to 96 years old.
Ooh.
96 years old. It absolutely breaks my heart. It's appalling to see those kinds of numbers. And they come from all different types of ethnicities, backgrounds, speak different languages, and definitely different socioeconomic classes. So, no, there is no one typical type of victim. And this is New York City, this is New York. So you see such a diverse range of people coming in all the time. And each client is so different. So you sort of have to individually cater your counseling to them. So that's something I've been learning. And I think as a future doctor, this is going to help me tremendously just to connect with different patients from different backgrounds as well.
Absolutely. Is there any, I mean, I know these are like horrible questions, but the way rape especially is treated by society is so horrible. I feel the need to bring them up so you can slap them down if you choose to. But is there something that you see as a pattern when women come in who've been raped? Have they been drinking? Have they been like, I mean, what do you want to say about the circumstances in which people get raped?
I really don't think there's a typical rape case that I've seen over and over again. I've had women who've been drinking, went on blind dates, and came in. I've had women who've been raped in a Uber. I have had
By the
women,
driver?
yes.
I'm not surprised, actually.
This was one of, yeah, this definitely happened. And I've had a 96-year-old woman who was raped by a family member. So
Oh, God. So
it's
is there any way, given that rapists are everywhere? I mean, I was reassured to learn that only 5% of men are sexual predators and they just commit a lot of crimes. Because otherwise you think, what's wrong with men? Like when I worked at the Rape Crisis Center, I went through this existential crisis. I was about your age. And I went through this kind of crisis of like, what is wrong with this gender? Like, how could they do this over and over? And it's quite terrifying. But then when you find out that there are predators and they just perpetrate again and again, it's weirdly reassuring. But what can women do? And I'm speaking specifically about women to, I mean, never to blame the victim, but what do you advise them to do to heal, to be safer going forward?
I think the biggest thing that I would tell people is just to move on their own time. When you pressure people into coming out too quickly or discussing the things they don't want to discuss too quickly or disclose this information to people they don't want to tell too quickly, I think it just worsens the trauma and just makes the situation worse over and over and over again. I think they need to be able to take their time to process it first themselves. And then if they don't want to speak to any family members or friends or anything, I think the biggest thing are these crisis centers,
Mhm.
which absolutely provide everything A to Z mental health crisis counseling, different types of counseling. It's not just individual, there's group counseling, there's different types of therapy. And these are expertly trained people who've done this thousands and thousands of times. So they know exactly what to do. And these hotline numbers, they're available 24/7. They can accommodate so many different languages and they're just available all the time. I think that's something they should definitely use. And then, just take time really heals all. It's a cliche phrase, but I think it's especially important in these situations because you want to take your time, you want to deal with these emotions yourself, and you want to take help when it's needed. And finally, when you're ready, more power to you if you want to disclose that story to everyone else and help others.
Right, absolutely. I was confused. I once called RAINN on behalf of a friend, RAINN, and that's like the big most famous sexual assault hotline. I was very surprised that they wanted her name. You know, why can't women report anonymously or speak to counselors anonymously?
Um, I can't speak for Rain, but for my center, we usually do get the first name of the person because just they're being admitted to the hospital. So, you obviously need to have the name and everything. But I would have to look it up into if you can call anonymously. I don't see why not.
Right,
If you're just looking for phone counseling, just help on the phone, I don't see why you can't just do it anonymously.
right.
Did you ask them? Did you ask if you had to disclose that information?
I did. I mean, I'm a big privacy,
Right.
hit. And also, since I was calling on behalf of a friend, I thought it was really inappropriate. I mean, especially inappropriate. And they said it was for census, like some sort of data entry reason. But I guess I just will say to everyone watching that if you have any anxiety about, sharing your personal information, you can call another hotline that does not require
Yeah.
it. And
Even if you do call Rain, maybe just request to keep yourself anonymous. I'm sure they'll be able to accommodate that. I don't think they'll deny services just because you don't want to give your name. So, um,
I, I absolutely hope you're right. What led you to want to do this work? I mean, again, you're very, young. You could be, well, you can't really be partying because it's, we're just getting out of quarantine and your
enough
hasn't
of
gotten
that.
out yet. But there are a lot of less painful, less dangerous things you could be doing with your life right now.
So I'm from a South Asian community where domestic violence, rape, and sexual assault is a really prevalent issue. I've grown up seeing domestic violence happen to a lot of my aunts, a lot of my family members, and I've heard about rape and sexual assault from a lot of people in my life personally. And I've always been into women's rights and health as well. When I was in college, I learned a lot about that. My master's thesis, I actually worked on like women's health. So it's just the social justice aspect of working with women through the counseling area and just like learning more about how to deal with them as a future OBGYN. It's just a mixture of that really pushed me into joining the crisis center. And once I started working there, it was just absolutely a dream job for me. It's actually got me considering even psychiatry as a specialty just because
Oh,
I love connecting with people so much through that way. And it's instant gratification when you talk to them and they go from one mood to like a completely different mood as they're leaving the hospital. It just fills my heart up, and I find it very gratifying work.
well, I mean, thank God you're there. I don't know if your generation kind of learns this in school, but that fight to have someone compassionate at the hospital or, even with the police when there's a domestic violence situation, that is something second wave feminists really fought for long and hard. And it was an uphill battle for years and years and years. And even now, I mean, there are so many women who say that their experience of reporting a rape in the hospital is traumatic. The rape kit gets taken. That's traumatic because it involves a pelvic swab, right? And then the rape kit sits on shelves.
A whole lot of things they do under the nail swabs. They'll pull hair out of your head. There's going to be hair samples from the pubic area. It's really a whole thing, and it's really traumatizing, especially if you went through that right before you came to the hospital. You're being asked the same questions by the doctors, the nurses, the police. So I try really not to ask them any questions, even though it's my job to know, but I'll try to get that information from the medical professionals. And then I try to just sit with them. And, it helps that a lot of them are younger and I'm also younger. So we sort of connect with things that don't have to do with what happened to them. And then we slowly open up into the discussion. I feel that really works with them, helps them connect with me, see them as a friend more so than a person who's just doing their job. Sorry about that. A person who's just doing their job. So I really find that style helps a lot of my clients.
Thank God. So you're saying for those of us who are watching, I mean, if God forbid someone gets raped, and she goes to a hospital, what happens then? Or what does she do? She calls 911 and she says, I've been raped when she's in a safe place. And then what happens? Like step by step, Naveena.
So in Nassau County, I can speak about that. So that's where my crisis center is. So as soon as the police receive a call, they'll take the client, the victim, to the hospital, and they'll be in the emergency room.
In a police car?
Yeah, ambulance, police car. If it's, if they have bodily injuries or any lacerations around the area or anything like that, it'll definitely be an ambulance. But they'll come to the emergency room. Then the hotline that at the crisis center that I work at, they'll get a call with the name of the patient and what type of case it is. They don't give me any more information than that. So as soon as I get the call, I'll have 1 hour to get to the
Oh,
hospital. And
gosh.
we cover about 4 to 5 hospitals in the Nassau County area. So wherever it is, I just drive to that. And as soon as I get there, the anticipation builds because you're about to go face this person. You don't know what kind of trauma that they just went through. So I really have to prepare myself mentally before I enter that room. But I try to smile. I try to keep myself calm. And once I get there, the nurse will already be there. She'll be doing a physical exam. And then
And what state are women in at this point generally? Are they in shock? Are they frozen? Are they crying?
it's different for different clients. I would say some of them are just completely fine. They just say what's happened and they go through the whole thing and they're, ready to press charges. Some of them can't speak at all. I've seen women who don't speak at all, and that's it's really important to be there for them, especially even if you're just there in silence, they know somebody's there. So I've seen those as well. I've seen women hysterically crying. I've seen women thinking about what they're going to do in the future. So it's really, people have different responses to this kind of trauma. I can't generalize that.
Would you say that the hospital staff and police are now pretty compassionate or not so much? Or
I've seen both sides of it as well. But the nurses that I've worked with, they're called the SANE nurses, and they're specifically on call for these types of cases at the hospitals I work at. They're absolutely wonderful. They're so patient. They know exactly what to say. And, I've had a really good experiences with them. Uh, with the police, sometimes, they understand, they go about it. Sometimes they're just really aggressive. They don't understand that this is a different kind of population that they're dealing with. And I need to have a little bit more training in that sort of area to be a little bit more sensitive to these kinds of cases that they deal with. They treat it like a regular interrogation, whereas it's supposed to be a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up because that's exactly another one of the fights that second wave feminists fought was police would ask things like, what did you do to provoke it, or didn't you agree to go out with this guy, or, and always, what were you wearing? Were you wearing underwear? I mean, I've been to a violent, I mean, all rapes are violent, but a violent rape trial where they held up the panties of the victim, like the prosecutor, like so much shaming. Do you think police are still doing shaming or invasive questioning, or are they minimally better?
I've seen it happen sometimes. I'm not going to lie. I've a lot of the police officers are really nice. They stay the whole time. They're very sensitive. But I have seen a lot of the officers who sort of just treat it like a regular interrogation. And I think I remember this one case in particular where the women, we suspected that she was a sex worker, and they just did not treat her the same way that they would treat anybody else just because she was a sex worker. And it was really disheartening to me. So I actually asked the officers to leave the room, that I would ask the questions, and if they needed something, they could just ask me then. And if they wanted to directly, that I wanted to be in the room with them. So I just didn't feel comfortable.
Do you think take the possible rape of married housewives or nuns or elderly ladies or children more seriously than they do women that they could dismiss as slutty or asking for it? I mean, that was, again, the, second wave feminist perception that there were good victims and victims that police didn't care about.
I haven't seen anything like that personally, except for the one case that I just mentioned about the possible sex worker. But I'm sure if it happens, it's just I've seen some of the attitudes of some of the policemen. They've straight out told me that the victim was smoking weed, so she must be lying. I was just like, first of all, that absolutely has no relation whatsoever. And why do you keep talking about marijuana when she's in here for something completely different? So that's just something I have to deal with when I go to these calls, and I'm just sort of realize that I need to be a little bit more assertive when I'm speaking with them, even though, it's that power distance and, they're police officers, whatever. But I just realized that my priority are my clients. I need to make sure that they feel safe. They just came from a very traumatic event and they need to be safe wherever they are. And this is a hospital. I'm not going to allow them to be re-traumatized over and over again.
Good for you. Would you say rapists have anything in common
With
with each other? Do men who rape women share certain obvious qualities, or are they just as diverse as victims in your experience?
I think so. I really think so because I told you I've seen family members do it. I've seen completely strangers as Uber drivers do it. I can't speak for their motives. I never had that interaction with perpetrators. Usually, most of my interactions are with victims.
Of
So,
course. But you're also confirming that it's not as if women can spot a potential rapist across the room and say, oh, that's a rapist guy over there. He looks like a rapist and talks like a rapist. I'll stay away from him. It does not work that way, right? What you're saying.
it's going to be, and it's really hard to. It's really hard to tell who it's going to be, and it's sometimes heartbreaking when you realize after that this is the person that did it to me. Because I told you, 98% of the people that are being raped, it's by somebody they know. So you trusted this person was in your life, and they completely do something so damaging to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's go to a last question. Let's go to the coronavirus epidemic and the quarantine that we're all living through. And New York City and its boroughs is the last part of our state, New York State. It's still under quarantine. You wanted to talk about domestic violence, especially because it's been reported that there's a spike due to the quarantine. Will you speak to that, please?
Yes, of course. So we have been seeing not only a spike in the United States, New York, but actually a global surge in domestic violence cases that are being reported since the restrictions for the lockdown have been taking place. And, this sort of makes sense because there's some studies that have been done seeing that what happens after natural disasters happen. So usually after a natural disaster, we have like closures of stores, businesses, people usually stay home and they don't go outside. And they've seen a continuous surge in domestic violence cases all across the world every time a tsunami, hurricane, or any type of natural disaster happens. And that's exactly what we're seeing with the coronavirus lockdown. People are staying in, and we're asking everyone to stay in the confinement of their homes so that they're safe. But these homes aren't always safe for domestic violence victims because we're asking them to stay inside, locked up with their abusers. So it's definitely increasing as we're speaking right now. And I think in France, there was a 30% increase, in Brazil, a 50% increase, in Spain, they've actually seen an increase in domestic violence related homicides.
Oh, God.
It's just been going up and up and up. And in the United States, since the pandemic, we've seen gun and ammunition sales have gone up, alcohol usage has gone up, and people are going through a lot of stressors. They're losing their jobs, they're losing income, and they're, for the first time probably in their entire workforce, they're being asked to stay home when they've been at work. So, it's really stressful events, and they're being locked down in their house, and it's the perfect time for them to take control over their victims and really torment them. And I feel for them so much because there's not much torture over and over again while we're asking them to do this for we don't even know how long at this point.
Can you give an example? Have you heard of any specific example of a woman who was really tormented and couldn't escape her abuser during the lockdown?
So no, right now we're doing phone consults at the Safe Center. So the couple of times that I've been on call in the past couple of months, I haven't received any call myself, so I thank God for that. But I can just imagine how, this abuse is all about control. So this situation is going to give them even more. So they can exaggerate what's going on outside to their victims, to not let them step outside. They won't let family members come in or friends come in so they can even disclose this information. And on top of that, phones are everywhere. So you can increase the surveillance of your partner's phone. So even if they want to call for help, it's really, really difficult to do so. And they're also staying home. So women with children who are going through this thing, the children are there, and usually abusers use children as a tactic to control the partner. So
I'll hurt the child if you don't comply, or how do they do that?
They'll just be like, I'll hurt the child, or I'll hurt the pet, or you won't be able to see your child, or this or that. So those are different ways that it's really a compounding thing. It's a multitude of things that are going to make the situation way worse.
Well, I really hope, everything you've said just makes so much sense. I really hope policies are put in place so that if this ever happens again, women are not trapped with their abusers in such an appalling way. Let's wrap up now with with policy, Naveena? What would you like to see? Are there any good bills that you know about? Is anyone doing it right? Does anyone spending enough money on victims? What would you like to see for the future?
So the Safe Center is, I think, more than 90%. It's funded by the federal government and the state government. So all of that money is really being used to provide all these free counseling services for a lot of our victims. And, the rest of the money really comes through private donations. And I recently saw that the CARES Act that Shirley Walker went through so beautifully and in depth, it has its flaws, but I did see that they allocated $45 million towards these causes specifically. So I'm really appreciative of that. But I think that they do need to pay more attention to these types of issues and increase the funding to these types of issues, because they're all free. And if you're charging money for it, a lot of people are not going to seek help. So it's really the government that should step in and do some more work and increase funding to these organizations. And then also another thing is that as a community, we need to also come together, especially during this time. We still have delivery drivers coming to the houses, postal workers still coming. So maybe like these organizations and corporations can train their employees to identify these signs of domestic violence. And really a simple call can save someone's life. So I just think it should be a community effort. And on top of that, right now we're not seeing any child abuse cases or anything pop up, and that's because children are staying home and they're not really getting the chance to report it to their school teachers or counselors. But we're going to see a surge as soon as they go back to school, we just need to be prepared for that.
So interesting. And also, when you were talking about delivery people still coming to people's houses, even passing out a leaflet with the package of groceries, saying, if you're being trafficked, if you're being assaulted, here's a phone number, that could be a lifesaver.
We definitely have to get creative, because these are unprecedented times, and we need to come up with creative solutions to deal with that.
So smart. Well, on that note, is there any last thing you want to say? I feel so moved. I mean, like with any survivor, like the more you're talking, the more I just want to kill myself. It's like such a terrible subject, but at the same time, I feel so happy to know that if God forbid this happens to someone who is lucky enough to cross your path or the path of the shelter that you work for, and with times of change, things are different, there are advocates, there's going to be a smiling, caring person like you waiting at the hospital. That's a huge revolution. So is there any last thing you want to say, Naveena? I'm so grateful for the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Naomi. It's been amazing working with you, and I feel blessed to be doing this work, and I hope to continue to do it throughout my career. But what I want to tell anyone who's watching this, if you or someone you need, if you or someone you know needs this kind of help, just know that there are hotlines available. Even though we're not doing any in-person consults, we're still doing phone consults. So make sure that you're able to take all of these important numbers and put it aside just in case you need it that one day. And on top of that, just keep all your documents together, your identification documents, your financial documents, your health insurance documents, because that's another thing that abusers like to do. They like to confiscate that and make sure that you're not able to navigate the outside world, even if you do get out there. So make sure you're keeping those in a safe place. If you're living with children, keep them in the loop. Let them know what's going on. Even if they're young, it's better that they know what's going on. Let them know not to intervene, not to come in between any of the violent arguments or fights that happen. And if you have a safety plan, an exit plan, keep them in the loop. Let them know what's going on. And also, if you can, just someone else on the outside, a neighbor, a friend, a family member, let them know what's going on. I know it's really hard during these times when you can't get any private moments alone, but any way that you can, make up excuses to leave the house so you can let somebody know if something does happen, create a safe word, a signal, anything like that. And definitely look into all the websites that are available to you for help. And
where do they find you on social media, Naveena?
So on Instagram, at navcity _ NAVCITY _. So I actually released a video there with all the hotline numbers. I pointed them out to different rape and sexual assault, domestic violence, mental health. So if you want to look, if you want to take a look at that, definitely check that out. And I will also send it to you if you want to post numbers on Valley Cloud as well, Naomi.
We really appreciate it. We could talk all night about this important subject. But thank you again so much, Naveena Chittineedi, Daily Clout's social media editor and an incredible advocate for survivors of violence. Have a wonderful, safe day. Thank you, Naveena.
Thank you so much for having me, Naomi. You too.
Take care.